You can do all the things. You can do the deep breathing, you can do the journaling, you can do the healthy eating. But if your mindset isn't where it needs to be, your nervous system is constantly going to revert back to fight or flight. So why are you so stressed? Why do you feel the need to overwork yourself? Why do you feel the need to burn yourself out? There's a root to that. Just like there's a physical root, there's a mental and emotional root as well. What is driving you wanting to be in this stress response all the time?
Hello and welcome back to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. Emmie Brown here with Melissa Gentile. Today we're excited to welcome Veda Leclerc. Veda is a dedicated functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and integrative health coach. Having faced her own struggles navigating the ins and outs of the medical system, Veda understands the darkness that can cloud one's being. She's committed to bringing light to others' health journeys and has established Wellness by Veda, offering personalized one-on-one coaching and employing a holistic whole body approach. Today, we're discussing healing hormones and gut health through nervous system support and cycle alignment. Thank you so much for being here, Veda.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Veda, we're so excited for today's episode, especially a big focus on hormones. It's been a really big trending topic in our industry lately, and I'm excited personally to learn from you. So I want to get us kind of started off here. What led you into this work?
Yeah, so I had my own health journey, as you briefly mentioned in my intro. I dealt with every symptom you could think of, hormone symptom, gut symptom, even mental and emotional symptoms. I suffered with really bad anxiety and depression. And essentially, I was dealing with all these things. I was going to the doctors and they were running blood work, but they were just telling me everything is normal. They're like, we don't find anything that's off. Maybe you just have a virus, it'll pass. And this was in December of, I want to say 2018, I believe, 2017 or 2018. And I just felt extremely ill and I was hospitalized. I was brought by an ambulance and all the things, and no one could give me answers. And eventually I got back up on my 2 feet. Like I started to feel a little bit better. But then just 2 months after that following year in February, I felt extremely ill again. This time I was worse. I literally felt like I was hit by a truck. I had the symptoms times 10. I was losing weight rapidly all of a sudden. My hair was falling out in clumps. My skin was breaking out. I was having one bowel movement a week. It was just a boatload of symptoms that kind of exploded at once, on top of now having daily panic attacks. I couldn't even go to school. I couldn't even go out in public without having a panic attack. And I went back to the doctors, literally couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And I suffered for about 2 years of dealing with these symptoms until my mom was seeing a naturopath at the time. And she was like, Veda, like, you need to get checked out. Like, there's something wrong. Especially my hair falling out in clumps at how young I was very concerning. So we went to the doctors. She ran blood work, but obviously looking at it from the functional lens. And she definitely found some imbalances. We started working on like tweaking my diet, tweaking my lifestyle, some supplements, but I still wasn't improving in the way that we had hoped for. So a couple months after that, she redid my labs and she started to notice a trend that my immune system was like completely tanked. And she's like, something is causing that. And she ran testing for Lyme and it came back positive that I had Lyme disease. So it was now 2020. I was in college. My very first year of college, year of the pandemic, all the stressors, and I got a phone call from my doctor, you tested positive for Lyme disease. And I remember my mom calling me freaking out, like, oh my God, you have Lyme disease. And I was so relieved. I was like, I have Lyme disease. Like, oh my God.
You're like, now I know what's wrong. Yeah.
Wow, like it wasn't in my head. There's something wrong with me. And because I had been undiagnosed for so long, I couldn't just do like a quick round of antibiotics. I had to do the herbal route. I had to completely change my diet and lifestyle even more than I did. And it was really hard because I wasn't in the health world. Like I did not care about my health. I was in college. But over time, I implemented these strategies. I noticed I started to feel a lot better. It took some time. But then that really sparked my interest in the functional medicine world. I was like, whoa, like this stuff works. I started listening to podcasts about it, reading books about it, following people on social media about it. And I just grew such a huge passion for it. So now here I am today, having my own business, helping other people essentially overcome what I went through and hopefully get them results faster than I did. But that my story is really what led me to the field that I'm in today.
My next question, and you somewhat already answered this, I wanted to ask about your aha moment from surviving to thriving. What was that aha moment? It sounds like it was that Lyme disease diagnosis. But if there was another aha moment, I would love to hear about that as far as a turning point for you. And also anybody maybe you want to shout out, a healthcare provider or a mentor. I love to hear kind of who inspires us along our journeys. And so if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah, so definitely my aha moment was the Lyme because I was like, wow, something's wrong. But I think my second aha-ish moment, it was more or less like over a period of time, is when I first got diagnosed with Lyme, I started taking the herbal treatment and all that. I was changing my diet. I was doing all of that. And I did start to feel a lot better, but I knew that there was more. I'm like, I still have some lingering symptoms. There's something missing. And I remember I was on a call with my doctor and she just told me the minorest tweak. She was like, start going to bed and waking up at the same time every day and get into a routine. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, is that really going to do anything? Like, I'm in college. I'm staying up super late. Like, I'm sleeping in. Like, there was no routine. And I took her word for it. And I started going to bed at the same time every day, getting into my body's circadian rhythm. It started helping regulate my nervous system. And that was truly like the missing point. And now with my clients, that is like the main thing I focus on is nervous system regulation. Because from my own journey, I was cutting out gluten, I was cutting out dairy, I was limiting seed oils and exercising, doing all the things. But it wasn't until I was working with my body rather than against it and started really heavily focusing on nervous system support is when everything changed. And I think that was another aha moment of, I think a lot of people underestimate the power of the nervous system and how important that is to healing. So that's something that, again, I carry into my practice. And shout out to my doctor. Her name's Carrie Werner. She's in Bath, Maine at Riverside Healing Center. And I wouldn't be here today without her. Like, she's the one that diagnosed me with Lyme disease. She's the one that would analyze my lab results when I had no clue what they meant. And ultimately what made me super interested in this space.
It's such a strong story and a strong start to kind of the space that you're in now. So thank you so much for sharing that. And kind of pivoting here into the work that you do with your own clients, like, why do you think some of these symptoms like bloating, fatigue, symptoms of hormone disruption, like, why are they so often dismissed?
I think it's because most people are going to the Western medicine world. Like, that's all they really know of. They just go to a PCP, they go to their primary care doctor, and they're going for their checkup. They're going to get blood work done. And the way that Western medicine analyzes lab is very different than what we do at the functional range of their levels. Like, I know a lot of people have thyroid issues. And if you're looking at like your TSH, for example, to see if your thyroid's working optimally, their range is so much wider, whereas our range is so much more smaller. So you're more likely to fall outside of the range, which would then correlate more to your symptoms versus the Western medicine of being like, oh, you feel like crap all the time, but it's in range. So there's nothing we can do about it. And not to mention, they're not even running the right labs. Like, they're not running the full thyroid panel or the full testing that we need to see to really correlate everything. But they just really put a Band-Aid on things. And I always tell this analogy to my clients, but if I could explain Western medicine versus functional medicine, is if you were to step on a tack, Western medicine puts a Band-Aid on that tack, whereas functional medicine removes the tack. It's like, let's get rid of this for good rather than just putting Band-Aid and Band-Aid and Band-Aid on it. And I think that's why people still struggle so often and they're misdiagnosed or they're not really heard, is because the lens of the Western medicine world is just so different than the lens of the functional medicine.
Yep. What do you believe is an example of a Band-Aid approach? Of course, this is symptom support. I know what you're speaking to, but for listeners out there, maybe if you can pick a condition, whether it's hormonal related like PCOS or something else, what is a Band-Aid approach? And I feel there is a time and a place for symptom support. So if you agree with that, even though it is not a long-term solution, what therapies are you using kind of in the short term to get people relief?
Yeah, great question. So I definitely agree that there is a time and a place for those Band-Aid solutions, for those medications. but while you're working on the root cause. So like that will kind of just help manage it, but not just, okay, I'm taking this med and I can continue to drink every day, eat processed food. Like that's where it's like, okay, there's a fine line between that. But in terms of an example of a Band-Aid approach, I can think of 1,000 off my head. But I feel like the most common ones, especially for women, is birth control. It's like you have acne, you have any sort of hormonal issue going on, let's put you on birth control. And I think it's so sad that so many women just aren't educated. And it really blows my mind of when I talk to women and they like don't understand the cycle. They're like, what's a luteal phase? Or like, I don't know what my period's supposed to be like. Like, oh, I don't have my period. Yay. Like, no, that's not yay. But people just aren't educated on that. So I think that birth control is a huge one. I think like you said, PCOS, like being put on metformin or acne, Accutane, spironolactone, thyroid medication, like the list literally goes on. And again, there's a time and a place for that. But if you are working on the root cause, like you shouldn't need to be on that medication forever. It's just for a small season and a small period of time. Like I was on birth control, I was on thyroid medication, I was on an antidepressant. But while I was on those things, I was working on the more internal, deeper root. So now I'm no longer reliant on that.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a little bit earlier, a few minutes back, about nervous system support and how kind of getting in tune with your circadian rhythm, going to bed at the same time, waking at the same time was a really big factor in your own healing. So why do you start every protocol with nervous system support for your clients?
Yeah, so I always, with my clients, I think when it comes to nervous system, there's so many things that come into play. Like obviously, when you hear the word stress and I tell people to alleviate stress, they step away. They're like, I can't get rid of
how?
Yeah. My job, my kids, my work, my finances, my relationships. And it's like there's so many other things that can cause stress of a processed diet, eating junk food every single day, not getting enough sleep. If you have any hidden pathogens or mold or mycotoxins chilling in your body, that is offsetting your nervous system. So I take all of that into consideration when working with my clients. But I think the biggest thing I at least try to heavily focus on is the mindset piece. Because your nervous system, you can do all the things. You can do the deep breathing, you can do the journaling, you can do the healthy eating. But if your mindset isn't where it needs to be, your nervous system is constantly going to revert back to fight or flight. So like what I do with my clients, I help them get to the root cause of their acne, their bloating, their fatigue. It's the same with the mindset issues of why are you so stressed? Why do you feel the need to overwork yourself? Why do you feel the need to burn yourself out? There's a root to that. Just like there's a physical root, there's a mental and emotional root as well. So that's what I kind of try to help my clients get out of them is what is driving you wanting to be in this stress response all the time.
I'm wondering, Veda, what's a strategy for that awareness? How do we elucidate what's driving that stress? And we've talked about this before on the podcast, but I think it's interesting. I think some people, in a way, more or less, I don't have a better word, but they may be addicted to kind of the roller coaster of stress hormones and the crashes. And so curious, kind of what's your process in terms of getting them to be aware? And then how do we then kind of break that cycle?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of inner work that needs to be done. A lot of going back to the roots of your childhood. Is there any certain childhood trauma? Are there any beliefs that you had growing up? Is there something like, for example, something that I'm still trying to overcome is like burnout. Like I'm a very like workaholic person, and trying to look back at my roots. I was always praised for being a straight A student. I was always praised for being top of my class. So that's what I mean by like going back to the roots of like, where is today's striving coming from? And it's likely maybe something from your past, an identity that you kind of took on that's like false. So really digging into that, whether that's through counseling, whether that's through journaling, like hardcore deep breathing work. And one thing that I love on my team is I have an emotional mindset coach. So every single month they have a call with her of helping make the subconscious conscious. And she does a lot of mindset work and visualization exercises. So it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, honestly, every day we're on a journey to continuously better ourselves and overcome these stressful patterns, especially in the world we live in today. But for those who are addicted to that stress, I can totally relate to that. Of there has been seasons in my life where like I know I'm addicted to it, because as soon as someone tells me to sit down and breathe, I'm like, I need to be doing something. Like where's my phone? Where's my emails? Like I need to be doing something. And or you're at the grocery store and you're like, where's the shortest line? Like I need to get out of here fast. Or you're in traffic and trying to speed through. So if you feel like you're addicted to any of those things, it's really, you have to you have to push past your comfort zone. And it's hard, it's uncomfortable, because it feels almost wrong. It feels lazy. It feels weird to just sit down for once and not do anything. But that is where that healing happens. Of you truly need to allow your body to feel safe enough to just calm down. And over time, your body's going to now result to that parasympathetic state rather than just living in the fight or flight all the time.
I was just going to ask, like, when you find yourself in those states, like, what's kind of one thing or first step that you try to implement, like, after you acknowledge this? Like, is it like an EFT tapping technique, or is it just like a meditation? Is it minerals? Like, is there something that you kind of is your go-to?
Yeah. So as someone who is a big believer in God, like that is my number one thing. Of I'm just like praying, I'm getting in the word, I'm asking God, like, just bring me peace, please. That is the hands down the best thing that I do. But in terms of that also, I'm a big talker. I'm the person who likes to share my emotions rather than keep them in. So literally just calling a friend or talking to someone and just kind of getting it out in the air is really helpful for me. But also I love journaling. Journaling is so helpful. I always tell my clients, literally just like brain dump on a piece of paper, because you're thinking in your mind of like all these things you need to do, or the future, the past, of what you're overwhelmed by. And it just feels like this jumble of emotions. But then when you put it on a piece of paper, you're like, oh, like it's not that bad. Or like, oh, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through this. So journaling is a great one, and deep breathing. I think so many people underestimate the power of the breath. It sounds so silly, like, oh, take deep breaths and it will calm you down. And you're like, what? Like, I breathe every day, all day. But truly sitting down and just taking in and out deep breaths just helps reset your nervous system, and it just instantly brings that calming feeling to your body. So I love doing things like that, and maybe putting some like calming music on in the background while I'm like doing the deep breathing.
And I want to get into the physical aspect of stress, Veda, while we're on the topic. And so blood sugar dysregulation, poor digestion, even overtraining can be very stressful to the system. So I'm sure these are foundational things that you also look at very early on in the process with your clients. Can you speak to those things?
Yes, for sure. There's a lot of times I see the people I work with overtraining themselves. I think that is probably the most common theme I see. Is a lot of women, they want to lose weight, they want to feel confident in their skin, and they come to me and they're like, I'm working out every day, like an hour in the gym, and I'm like, girl, like that's not helping you, that's harming you. And that goes back to the power of working with your body rather than against it. And I'm a huge person that supports cycle syncing. And that was something that really changed the game for me, of aligning my workouts with my cycle. So when I am in my luteal phase, when your hormones are starting to naturally decrease, I'm not going to hit a PR. I'm not going for a HIIT cardio session. I'm focusing on like light weightlifting or going for a walk or doing yoga. Whereas if I'm in my follicular ovulatory, estrogen's on the rise, you're feeling that energy boost, that's where I really tap into the heavier lifting, and maybe the more cardio sessions. And that is a great example of working with your body rather than against it. So that's a common thing I see people of. It's just really throwing off their nervous system, of constantly overtraining. And then even the blood sugar piece, like you said, I think so many people don't know the importance of blood sugar until they're diagnosed with diabetes or pre-diabetes. And that's when they maybe take metformin or pay a little bit more close attention to it. But cortisol, the stress hormone, and blood sugar go hand in hand. So if one's rising, the other one's rising, and that's going to throw off your nervous system. So blood sugar support is one of the very first things I do with my clients before we even do the lab testing and get the results back. I'm telling them to prioritize your blood sugar, heavily focus on that, because that will help a lot with the nervous system.
And while we're on the topic of these foundational pieces of the puzzle for these complex cases of hormonal disruption, opening drainage pathways is something that we're hearing a lot about. So I want to touch on detoxification support before we move on. And I want to hear more about your approach to kind of working with our cycles. What does opening drainage pathways actually look like in practice? How do you approach it? I think every practitioner is a little bit different.
Yeah, I think definitely is being more talked about, like what's a drainage pathway and more information on that. But to sum it up in very simple terms is, are you pooping, peeing, and sweating? And if you say yes to all those things, like, okay, your drainage pathways are likely doing better than most people. But when we think of drainage, it's opposite of detox. So when I am with my clients, I always want to focus on opening their drainage pathways before we go detox. So if they come to me and they're not really having a daily bowel movement, if they're not sweating, they're not hydrating, and we get their gut test back and they have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, I am not eradicating that bacteria until they're pooping, peeing, and sweating. Because what's going to happen is we're going to go kill off that bad bacteria, but now it's more potent in your body, but it's not leaving your body. So now you're likely going to experience maybe Herxheimer symptoms of you feel very headachy or fatigue, or your skin starts breaking out. You feel sick, like you have the flu. So drainage is just so important of making sure that you're having the bowel movements, you're staying hydrated, flushing out your kidneys, you're doing the liver support of maybe like castor oil packs, but also removing all the things that are damaging your liver in the first place, supporting the mitochondria of like waking up with the rise and fall of the sun and the moon. Is really important. So really, honestly, it's just the foundations that kind of allow your body to open those drainage pathways. So then you can go detox. So then whenever you detox, it now leaves your body successfully.
Another foundation that I feel like is becoming kind of trendy and we're hearing a lot about is mineralization. So why are minerals so crucial for hormone and gut healing protocols?
Yeah, I think minerals are really important and they're also very underestimated. I do something called an HTMA test with all my clients and it gives you insight into your mineral status. But minerals are truly spark plugs. And if your minerals are very imbalanced, you're likely going to feel imbalanced. It goes back to that nervous system piece we were talking about earlier of when we think of stress, we think of like the external factors that feel like they're out of our control. But having something as little as your minerals being super imbalanced can cause your adrenals to be sluggish, can make your nervous system feel sluggish, can make you feel more anxious. But it's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg, because your minerals become imbalanced due to high stress, but then high stress further depletes your minerals. So minerals are super important. It helps support that nervous system. It helps support your thyroid. It helps support your mitochondrial health. And also, a lot of the times with healing, it requires energy. Like a lot of healing requires energy. And most people are struggling with fatigue. They're lacking the energy. And when we go in and support those minerals and give them that mineral boost, then their body feels more safe and it has that more cellular energy to then go and detox, per se, like a gut pathogen, for example.
And this is a good segue, Veda, into functional medicine tests that you like to use. You just mentioned one. And so I want to bring a little bit more insight into hormonal imbalance here. But are you using urine and saliva hormone testing? What about stool testing? You referenced that a little bit earlier. And I'm curious kind of just about what patterns are you seeing in your client base?
Yeah, so I do the HTMA, which is the hair test that I just mentioned, and then I also do stool testing. So those are my top two that I do. And even though my niche is kind of more hormone related, I surprisingly don't start off with hormone testing. And the reason being is because my personal opinion is if I were to get their hormones back and their estrogen is super high or super low or their detoxification is backed up, my first question becomes why? Why is that estrogen so high? Why is it so low? And that why is likely going to point me to stool testing, looking into the gut. It's going to point me to, does this person have hidden mold or mycotoxins? What do their minerals look like? So that's why I always wait to do hormone testing. And I like to focus on the foundations, focus on the minerals, focus on the gut, see where your hormones balance out. If you're still struggling a little bit, okay, that's when we should maybe dig deeper on hormone testing. When I do hormone testing, I like to do urine testing for that. But normally the stool and the mineral are like my top two normally with clients.
Let's transition to cycle syncing, Veda. You mentioned it just prior, but can you tell us what is cycle syncing? Define that for us, please. And how is your approach different from typical advice in terms of, how we should go about tracking our periods and what we should think about? And I do think there's differences for cycle to cycle. So I just think, can we define what cycle syncing is and kind of your approach to it?
Yeah, so cycle syncing is essentially aligning your life with your cycle. So whether that's nutrition, whether that's your workouts, whether that's just like social events, hanging out, lifestyle things, of aligning it with the phases of your cycle. So you have like your menstrual phase where you're like bleeding, you're on your period, and then you enter your follicular, then you have your ovulatory, and then you have your luteal phase. And throughout those 4 phases, your hormones are never the same. So at the beginning, you have like the estrogen starting to rise, which gives you a little bit more energy. And then eventually it's going to drop and that progesterone is going to come in. And that progesterone is more of our relaxation hormone. So in simple terms, you're basically living according to your estrogen and progesterone. So when your estrogen starts to rise in your follicular ovulatory, you should naturally feel a little bit more energy. So like I mentioned earlier, you can rev up your workouts. There's certain foods that you should be eating around that time. And then you go back onto the other end where the estrogen is starting to lower and progesterone starting to increase. That is when you want to dial back on your workouts. You want to focus more on like nourishing foods. I like to explain it to my clients as like seasons of when you think of like the follicular phase, you think of like springtime, ovulatory summertime, luteal phase is fall, and then menstrual is winter. So when it's fall and winter, what are you doing? You're likely having like soups and stews and you're bundling up and you're staying in and you're relaxing. Whereas in the spring and summer, you're having like colder foods and salads and smoothies and you're going out more often. You're staying up maybe a little bit later. So that's kind of a good way to remember it if it's harder to remember like exactly what your hormones are doing. So that's kind of what cycle syncing is. And I really try to encourage my clients and even like people following me on social media to learn more about it because I think so many people, even if they are in the wellness space, they're kind of ignoring that part of the cycle syncing aspect of a woman's body is just so unique and it's so bio-individual. So you can't compare it to like working with a male or working with like someone who is very postmenopausal. Like it's very different structure that you need to take. And it always goes back to you want to work with your body rather than against it. And when you're not cycle syncing, you're leaving more room for your body to be worked against, which can slow down the healing. It can cause more symptoms. So I think the power of cycle syncing is really, really helpful. And it helped me so much in my journey.
And how do you suggest women track their cycles to understand associations between stress, diet, activity level, etc.? Do you have a favorite app or tool?
Yeah, so I personally use something called Thermometer. I absolutely love them. It's like, it kind of looks like an Oura ring for those who are familiar with that, but it's just a ring that you wear right before bed and then you take it off in the morning. But it's tracking your temperature. So that's kind of the main thing that you really want to do is track your temperature. That is what's going to give you clues into what phase you're likely in. So that is a great option that I love doing. You also have the Oura ring. There's natural cycles that's out there. Tons of different good tools. I would be cautious about just downloading a random app on like the app store. Of if there's nothing that's really tracking your temperature, just take that with caution. Tracking your temperature is the biggest thing. And you can literally order like a basal body temperature on Amazon. You can start tracking your temperatures every day, write them down. When you notice that there's like a slight spike in it and there's like a drop in it, then that will give you some signals and like, oh, yep, I ovulated. Okay, now I'm going into my luteal phase. So that is my biggest tip is just start tracking and get the actual number data.
And how long does it take to see noticeable changes when you start implementing like cycle syncing techniques?
I think for most people, my rule of thumb is 3 months. That's what I've just seem to find, like based on research and stuff, that works better when it comes to hormones of like giving it a 3-month stretch. So like 3 cycles. Whereas I've had some clients who come to me with like horrible PMS symptoms and within a month or 2, they're already starting to notice way less period cramps and symptom aggravation. So it honestly depends on the person, but I would say like 3 months is like the rough estimate timeline.
And is this from like a nutritional standpoint, supplement standpoint, and lifestyle? Like what exactly does that all entail?
Yeah, so I don't overly recommend supplements in terms of the cycle syncing approach. One thing I love is seed cycling. I think seed cycling is so important for balancing your hormones. I've seen great results from it. And then in terms of the nutrition aspect, it's more or less, like I said, like the maybe more cooler foods at the beginning of your phases, like the spring and summers, and then the fall and winter is when you want to go more into that, like nourishing your body, maybe increasing more like magnesium rich foods, zinc foods to support that progesterone. So just making sure you're supporting your body in that alignment can be really helpful.
Are you tailoring like workout schedules to this as well? I've seen a lot about that.
Yeah, I recommend it to my clients. And when clients work with me, they have like this whole module on explaining cycle syncing, what to eat, what to exercise, lifestyle tips like that. But I normally encourage them the main thing, listen to their body. I think that is the biggest tip when it comes to cycle syncing is I don't want this to be like, oh, I'm ovulating and I feel exhausted, but I'm supposed to be heavy lifting right now. Like always listen to your body. So that's what I encourage my clients to do, of following the cycle of heavier lifting and the ovulatory, lighter lifting in the luteal. But again, if your body is exhausted, if it's craving that rest, listen to that and just like work with your body essentially.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Veda, because that was my next question, being how do we add in flexibility? Because cycle syncing is going to look different each month, I imagine. I mean, I know that it does as a woman myself. And to quote one of my favorite healthcare practitioners and women's health experts who we had on the podcast, Dr. Laura Bryden, and that was so exciting also. She calls our periods, she refers to a period as the health report card for the prior month. Mm-hmm. And I just love that so much because, and I think we've all experienced this, where we might have 1 month where there's notable PMS, painful cramping, and then the next month you're totally surprised by when you get your period. There was no PMS and it's just easy breezy. So I think that's so important to bring up, that we have to listen to our body. Each month is going to be different. And it's a really nice way to kind of reflect to say, if there's a difficult period, what was going on the month prior? And maybe there was something in terms of really pushing ourselves during the luteal phase, or a lot of stress, maybe eating more processed foods or consuming more alcohol. So being mindful that it's a very dynamic system also is really important.
Yeah, for sure. And I've had my fair share of, I've had more times than not having no PMS symptoms. I used to be someone who excruciating PMS, popping ibuprofen. I used to think I had to go to the hospital a few times because of how bad my cramps are. To now I probably get PMS 1 time a year maybe in my cycles, which I'm so thankful for. But it is such a beautiful thing. Like I think a lot of women, they look at their period and they're like, oh, like I don't want my period. Like give me on birth control so I don't have to have it. But like, as weird as this to say, I love my period. Like every time I get my period, I'm like, my body feels safe. It feels healthy. Like it's your
I love that.
mind. So I definitely noticed, like, for example, last fall, I moved to Florida from Maine. It was a very busy month and I was due for my period and I started to get very irritable. I felt like I had such bad sugar cravings. Like I could eat my whole pantry. I had bad cramps. But I was able to pinpoint it of like, well, this month was a lot of stress with moving. So it's just a beautiful thing of, I think cycle syncing really allows you to become more in tune with your body.
That's a good way to put it.
We talked about the nervous system, but I want to know about kind of looking forward. What excites you about increased focus on trauma-informed care and nervous system regulation? Because we are seeing this popping up in wellness circles a little bit more. So what's exciting to you right now? Maybe there's a certain therapy or modality or a study or book. What's exciting to you right now in terms of nervous system awareness?
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing to me is honestly how more aware people are becoming of it and how people are talking about it more and more. When I think of health, I think of nervous system being like the tippy top, and then the gut, the minerals, the hormones, they all fall underneath. And if you don't address the top, everything else is going to continuously be imbalanced. I mean, you hear stories of people who drink Diet Coke every day and have Burger King, but they're so healthy because they don't stress about anything. They're like, their lives look great. They're barely sick. They're living till they're 100 years old.
We all know those people.
Right? And we're like, here I am eating so healthy, cutting out gluten, going to bed at a good time. And my labs are so much worse than yours, but it's because it really comes down to the stress. So I think that's just the best thing, is that how more aware people are coming with it, like all the research and studies and all of that good stuff. And I really hope in the future that more people in this space start heavily focusing on the nervous system rather than just like take all these supplements and do this and do that, because essentially that's probably causing more stress for people. People are already so overwhelmed. Their lives are chaotic. They don't want more. They need less. So I'm just really happy that it's becoming more and more talked about.
And Veda, before we wrap, I do have to ask, how do you help clients create safety in their body before the deeper work begins?
Yeah, great question. So I have that emotional mindset coach my team. So I encourage my clients to go to her calls and just really help regulate her. Another thing too, I do with all my clients, so before we even like essentially start our work together, starting the protocols, the lab testing, is I really help them focus on their mindset. So like some of the common things I tell them is I'm like, focus on 1% shifts, focus on progress over perfection, and focus on consistency over constant. That is my main goal for them, because when I give them this protocol, the last thing I want is for them to look at it, feel so overwhelmed that they don't even do it, or they do it all, but they feel restricted and they're more stressed. And then by the time we're done working together, they go all the way back to their old habits. So when I very first meet with them, honestly, before I really dive into like more of like the gut and the minerals and the hormones, I'm like, you need to focus on mindset. Like you need to ingrain these in your head. I have a module that I tell them, start here before you start learning about cycle syncing and toxic products and gluten. Start getting this in your mind of, I don't expect you to be perfect. Be consistent. Don't worry about starting on Monday. If you fell off over the weekend, just get right back into it. 1% shifts. A step is still a step. So it really goes back to that mindset component that I just really try to focus on with my clients.
I love it. Such a good, like, well-rounded and gentle approach there. And Veda, thank you so much for taking the time the last hour or so to come on the show today. I feel like we touched on so many different subtopics within like the overarching theme here between gut health and hormones, which is a really big topic just in the media right now. And I feel like our episode was really efficient. Like I pulled so many things from here. I definitely have to go back and re-listen, and I'm inspired to check out cycle syncing a bit more. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. And if anyone tuning in wants to connect with you, work with you, or just resonates with your messaging, where can we find you online?
Yeah, so I post on Instagram and TikTok. It's Wellness by Veda, VEDA. And then my website is also wellnessbyveda.com.
Awesome. We'll link these down below for you guys. You can find Veda online. And again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on. And until next week, wishing us all vibrant health and wellness.
Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning in to the Vibrant Wellness podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Join us again next week. And just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views expressed by guests and hosts are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy of Vibrant Wellness. As always, consult your healthcare provider before applying any recommendations that you heard here today.